Hey Eagle fans, this is EaglefanKarl. This is going to be a quick check-in, let you know what I thought of today's win against the Minnesota Vikings, as we finally were able to stop the two-game losing streak, get back in the win column, and also give the Vikings their first loss of the season. Let's start off right at the top with talking about the coaching, because last week I was really critical of how Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz both approached the game against the Redskins. And this week, I've got to say the exact opposite. I thought their game plans for both sides of the ball were perfect. I thought that they did a good job on offense of not trying to do too much. I think on defense, they took advantage of the fact that Minnesota really had struggled moving the ball all year, and they knew that, and they knew that they could get pressure on Sam Bradford, and Sam Bradford is prone to make mistakes when he gets under pressure, and those things happened in this game. And typically, I think of in the second half where we had the lead, and Doug Peterson stuck to the running game and just drove the ball methodically down the field, eating time up off the clock, and just pounding the ball constantly. Throwing some passes in here and there, but for the most part, he kept the ball on the ground, which is what I thought we needed to do, especially the way this game started out. When I did my prediction video, I said that I thought turnovers were going to be a big deal in this game, given the fact that both teams were so good at protecting the ball and not turning it over. Well, I was right about the fact that the turnovers were going to be a big deal, but not about how well both teams were taking care of the ball, because as we all know, the game just started out absolutely crazy with both teams committing turnover after turnover, with 5 possessions in a row ending in turnovers by that team's offense. So it just sort of got crazy, and it was like both teams were trying to give the game away early. And fortunately, I think we came out on the better end of that. Even though we ended up with 3 turnovers to their 2 early on, it still ended up, I think, working out in our favor, because when we were turning the ball over, it was deep in our own territory, and then they came out with no points as a result of that. The one stat that they put up after halftime that they even remarked about in the broadcast that I thought was right on is the fact that both teams had 3 turnovers, but the only points that resulted in that is we got 1 field goal off their last turnover, not the 5 that had happened all back to back. It was the final 6th turnover in the second quarter that ended up resulting in points for us. But it was just really sort of a crazy way that game started out. And all possible that Doug Peterson didn't initially intend to stick so much to the running game. And after that initial exchange in the first quarter with all the turnovers, he decided to go to it. Or maybe that was in his game plan all along. If we got a lead, was just to sort of stick to the running game and recognize that it was going to be hard for them to move the ball. But at any rate, I thought sticking with the running game, especially in the second half when we had the lead, was really important. When you think about it, the one play that really just sort of turned the whole game around was the kickoff return that we got for the touchdown, because that just sort of, once we got that lead, it was like the Vikings were realizing that they were having a hard time moving the ball, and we were the first team to get a touchdown. And I think psychologically that did a lot, because both teams were struggling so much on offense and both defenses were playing so well at the beginning of that game. So the kickoff return was huge. Like I said, kudos to Doug Peterson for sticking with the running game in the second half and really just trying to maintain the ball, keep that lead, and just run out the clock. And I think that that was absolutely the best thing that we could have done in that situation. That also gave Jim Schwartz a little bit more flexibility in his defensive play calling as well, to be able to blitz a little bit more. He was able to take a little more chances because he knew that they weren't going to have the ball that much, and they were going to have to try and do things maybe that they didn't want to do, and they were going to have to try and pass the ball a little bit more, or to make them a little bit more one-dimensional, because they were really struggling running with the ball as well. So kudos to both coaches for really sort of adapting a little bit, recognizing what was happening during the game, and sticking with what was working and what was going to help you win the game. One of the criticisms I had long-term of Andy Reid was his stubbornness as it related to sort of making that modification during a game when you saw a game was going a certain way. I think of games where they had bad weather and passing the ball was going to be real difficult, but he tried to do it anyway. And it wasn't even games where you had to pass because you were behind. And those kind of things used to drive me nuts. And it was clear that I think Doug Peterson recognized in that game that since we had the lead, all we really had to do was just sort of run that clock out, let the defense do its thing, and continue to bring pressure because Minnesota was struggling so much in moving the ball. If you look at Sam Bradford's stats at the end of the game, I think they were a little misleading, because really, when it comes right down to it, most of those yards and the touchdown pass came late in the game, sort of during garbage time when we were allowing them to complete a lot of passes underneath, just so the clock would continue to run. So really, he struggled throughout that game, and most of his yardage and the one touchdown came late in the game after it really didn't even matter. I think we do have to talk a little bit about the quarterback play of Carson Wentz in this game, because it was a little disappointing early in the game, especially some of the decisions he was making. But I think we need to remember that he is a rookie quarterback, and he's going to go through a learning process with a lot of this. These are the type of games where you might have a couple of these games a year when you have a rookie quarterback where you're going to have to win a game another way. You're not going to be able to rely on your offense to win the game for you. You're going to have to win it with defense, maybe a big special teams play like they had today. Now, ultimately, Carson Wentz was able to move the ball in the second half, and he was able to get a touchdown drive together. But really, when it comes right down to it, this game was won by our defense. But that's okay. I mean, he's a rookie quarterback, and we need to remember that. I think we sort of got all caught up in the Wentz wagon the first 3 weeks, which I think was absolutely, he was entitled to that, and he certainly was entitled to all the praise he was getting for how well he had played. But there are going to be moments like this, I think, throughout his rookie year. The important thing is that you see that he's learning from it and that he improves down the road. So it'll be interesting to see that if he gets in one of these games again, where it's really a defensive struggle, how much he tries to do. And I think Doug Peterson probably recognized that. And once again, I think why they stuck so much to the running game in the second half is because Doug did not want to ask him to do more than really what Carson was going to be able to do and be successful at, going up against, let's face it, probably one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the NFL. It was a great game, once again, by our defense, and a huge win. And it was especially huge when you consider what we've got coming up. If you look at this schedule that we've got, you can see all of these teams except 2 have winning records currently. And the 2 teams that have losing records right now are only 1 game below 500 and easily could be above 500 when we play them. So I really think that we've got to be playing some of our best football down this next stretch of games. And I think it's getting a lot more difficult for us to really just have a bad game or a week off like we had the last 2 weeks prior to this one. I also think that if we look at the league and the division as a whole, I think we have to admit that this division's a lot better than we had originally thought it was going to be. All of the teams are playing fairly decently right now. As a matter of fact, every team in the NFC East has a winning record right now, which is something that I don't think anyone would have predicted, especially when we were playing the likes of teams in the NFC North and the AFC North, who have teams like the Vikings, like the Packers, like Pittsburgh, like Cincinnati. Those are all really good quality teams that were all in the playoffs last year and all look to be playoff type teams this year. So our division is playing both those divisions, and we're playing all those teams. It's not like we're playing cupcakes. So the fact that every team in our division has a winning record, I think really says something about the fact that this isn't the NFC least like we had seen in the past. This is a really strong division. And originally when I had said 10 wins would win the division, I don't think that's the case anymore. If we get to 10 wins, that probably puts us in the playoffs, but I don't know that that necessarily wins us the division. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We're only 6 games in. But like I said, because of the way our schedule looks from now to the end of the season, we're going to have to be playing some of our best football. We've got 2 big games coming up, road games against division opponents. Both of those teams will be coming off of their byes. So really, we're going to have to be playing some of our best football the next 2 weeks. And the next week, it gets even more interesting as we go down to Dallas and we play those 2 rookies. And we get to see the 2 rookie quarterbacks battle it out on Sunday night. So that's going to be real interesting. I'll go ahead and check in before that game, give you my prediction and my thoughts as to what I think is going to happen in the Eagles-Cowboys game. But until then, fly Eagles fly.